Hello friends. Welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 awakened the legendary infant. Ity Omnitrix and got Harem of Princess Looma, Frightwig and Eunice. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Cosmic Convergence. The Chronosapiens' metally sea body gleamed in the purple light of the temporal distortion, its clock-like face spinning backward as it manipulated the fabric of reality. Ben Tennyson, 20 years old and bearing the scars of countless battles across the cosmos, kept his distance as he analyzed the situation. The abandoned quantum research facility on the outskirts of Bellwood provided the perfect cover for temporal criminals. Far enough from civilization to avoid casualties, close enough to Earth's unique chronon particles to amplify their powers. Running facial recognition now, Eunice's voice came through his earpiece, calm and methodical. Primary target confirmed as temporal, wanted in 3 sectors for chronological manipulation. Secondary targets appeared to be mercenaries from the Andromeda galaxy. Ben nodded, though she couldn't see him. Years of experience had taught him patience, a quality his teenage self would have found impossible to comprehend. What are they after in this facility? It's been abandoned since the incursion invasion. The database indicates project continuity was housed here, Eunice replied, the sound of rapid typing accompanying her voice. Research into stabilizing wormholes, using a combination of Earth science and salvaged Galvan technology. The wind shifted, carrying the acrid scent of ozone and burned circuitry. Ben inhaled deeply, centering himself as he observed more figures emerging from the rusted service entrance. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated for common thugs. Military training, perhaps, or something equivalent in whatever corner of the galaxy they hailed from. 5 targets total, he whispered. I'm moving in. Ben slid down the embankment, using the overgrown vegetation for cover. His hand hovered over the Omnitrix, no longer the bulky device of his youth, but a sleeker, more integrated system that hugged his wrist like a second skin. Azimuth's latest iteration responded to neural patterns as much as physical touch, the bond between wearer and device growing stronger with each passing year. The smallest mercenary, a necrophrygian hybrid based on the crystalline patterns along their wings, suddenly paused and turned toward Ben's position. We have company, they hissed, voice like ice cracking. Perfect, Ben muttered, abandoning stealth for speed. The Omnitrix responded to his thoughts, cycling through alien forms before settling on fast track. The transformation washed over him in a flash of emerald light, muscle memory taking over as his body elongated and strengthened. The world slowed around him as his perception accelerated, neurons firing at superhuman speeds. He closed the distance in milliseconds, disarming 2 mercenaries before they could even register his presence. The third, a bulky tetrama, ND female with a modified plasma cannon, managed to track his movement pattern and fired a spread that forced him to change direction. Smart. Most opponents never adjusted for his speed. The Chronosapien is accessing the main vault, Eunice reported. Energy readings suggest temporal manipulation in progress. The Tetraman mercenary smiled, revealing metal-capped teeth. You're too late, Tennyson. The convergence has already begun. Something in her tone triggered an alarm in Ben's mind. This wasn't a simple heist. The coordinated attack, the specific timing, they wanted him here. The realization came a moment too late as the Chronosapien's chest cavity opened, revealing not the expected time manipulation mechanism but a modified quantum field generator. A blinding white light erupted from the device, expanding in concentric rings that distorted everything they touched. Eunice, I need an extraction. Ben shouted, already switching forms. Fast-track speed wouldn't help against whatever temporal weapon they'd deployed. The Omnitrix sparked against his skin, the familiar transformation sequence stuttering as the temporal wave washed over him. For an instant, Ben existed in multiple states simultaneously, human and alien, past and present versions of himself overlapping like ghostly images. Ben, Eunice's voice crackled through static. Something's interfering with her transmission cut off as the quantum field intensified. Pain lanced through Ben's body as the Omnitrix reacted violently to the temporal distortion. Green energy coursed along his arm in fractal patterns, the device seemingly fighting against the external force. Through watering eyes, He watched the mercenaries retreat through a shimmering portal while the Chronocypian remained, its mechanical body disintegrating as it channeled more power into the quantum field. It's a suicide mission, Ben realized, forcing himself to move despite the agony racing through his nervous system. The Omnitrix flared brighter, its surface shifting like liquid metal as new patterns emerged from within, ancient Galvan symbols he'd never seen before. The Chronocypian's expressionless face rotated toward him. The Infinity Nexus approaches, bearer. The convergence was always meant for you. Its voice resonated with unnatural harmonics as its body crumbled further. We are merely the catalyst. Above them, the sky split open, revealing a cosmic tapestry of impossible colors. Stellar formations not visible from Earth's position in the galaxy shone through the rift, constellations shifting and realigning in patterns that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. At the center, 3 stars of different colors, sapphire, emerald, and ruby, aligned perfectly in a configuration that occurred once every 27,000 years. The Omnitrix pulsed in rhythm with the stellar alignment, each beat sending waves of energy through Ben's body. The pain receded, replaced by an overwhelming flood of information, genetic codes, dimensional coordinates, temporal algorithms, more data than any human mind could process. What's happening to me? Ben gasped, watching as the Omnitrix's familiar green gave way to a swirling cosmos of stars and nebulae contained within the small device, reflecting the celestial event above. The Chronocypian gave a sound like mechanical laughter as its body continued to disintegrate. The Celestial Cypian spoke of this moment. The Infinity Omnitrix awakens. With those final words, the temporal being collapsed completely, the quantum field imploding with a thunderous CR. Act that shook the foundation of the abandoned facility. The implosion created a vacuum that pulled at Ben with terrifying force. He clawed at the ground, searching for purchase as the vortex threatened to drag him into whatever dimensional rift had opened. Through the chaos, a figure sprinted toward him, humanoid but moving with impossible agility. Platinum blonde hair whipped around a face both familiar and changed. Eunice. Her normally calm features set in determined lines as she fought against the dimensional current. Ben, she shouted, extending her arm. Take my hand. He reached for her, their fingers almost touching before the Omnitrix released a pulse of energy that knocked them both backward. The device was changing, restructuring itself at a molecular level. The familiar circular faceplate expanded slightly, the green hourglass symbol deepening to a midnight emerald that seemed to contain infinite depth. Intricate patterns of silver-white energy coursed through new channels in the band, forming complex Galvan script that shifted and changed as Ben watched. The sky above normalized as suddenly as it had ruptured, the stellar alignment passing as the cosmic bodies continued their eternal dance. The implosion reversed, energy dispersing outward in a non-destructive wave that washed over the landscape, leaving behind an eerie silence. Ben lay on his back, staring at the now ordinary night sky. The Omnitrix on his wrist pulsing with a gentle light that cycled slowly through the colors of the 3 aligned stars before settling back into its familiar emerald glow, though somehow deeper. More vibrant than before. Ben, can you hear me? Eunice knelt beside him, her analytical eyes scanning both him and the transformed device. Her hand hovered over the Omnitrix without touching it, as though sensing the power radiating from within. I'm okay, he managed, sitting up slowly. What just happened? I don't know, she admitted, the uncertainty in her voice raw. For someone designed to process and analyze information. But the Omnitrix readings are. I've never seen anything like this. It's as though it's evolved. Ben flexed his hand, feeling the subtle difference in how the device connected to him. The bond had always been strong, sometimes uncomfortably so, but now it felt like a natural extension of his consciousness, the barrier between technology and biology blurred beyond recognition. The Chronocypian called it the Infinity Omnitrix, Ben said, remembering the being's final words. Said something about a convergence meant for me. Eunice helped him to his feet, her touch lingering longer than strictly necessary. 6 years of working together had created a comfortable familiarity between them, though recently Ben had noticed subtle changes in her behavior, moments of hesitation, extended eye contact, the occasional unnecessary physical proximity. The Omnitrix had evolved considerably since her creation, developing a complexity of emotion that sometimes seemed to surprise even her. We should contact Azimuth, she suggested, brushing dust from her uniform, a modified plumber design with additional tech interfaces that complemented her unique biology. If anyone would understand what's happened to the Omnitrix, it would be its creator. Agreed, Ben nodded, then paused as a new sensation washed over him, awareness of something approaching fast. We've got company. Before Eunice could respond, a sleek vehicle materialized above them, its stealth system disengaging to reveal a modified plumber interceptor. The ship hovered silently, its engines emitting only the faintest hum as it descended to the clearing beside the research facility. The boarding ramp extended, and a figure strode out, tall and lithe, with distinctive magenta hair styled in multiple tendrils that seemed to move with a life of their own. Her attire combined practical body armor with elements that hinted at a performer's flair for the dramatic. A foe. RMER villain Ben hadn't encountered in years stood before them, her expression unreadable. Frightwig, Ben acknowledged, instinctively shifting into a defensive stance. The last he'd heard, she'd left Fort Earth after the circus freaks had disbanded. Tennyson, she returned with a curt nod. Looks like I'm too late to stop it. Stop what? Eunice stepped forward, positioning herself slightly between Ben and the newcomer. What do you know about what just happened? Frightwig's hair tendrils coiled and uncoiled in agitation. The Chronosapian Collective has been planning this for decades. Why call it the Infinity Convergence? A cosmic event that occurs once every 27 millennia when the perfect conditions align to catalyze the evolution of certain technologies. Her eyes fixed on the transformed Omnitrix, particularly those with connections to the fundamental forces of the universe. How do you know all this? Ben questioned, not lowering his guard. Last I checked, ain't exactly involved in cosmic-level events. A sardonic smile twisted her lips. Let's just say prison gives you plenty of time for reading. After that, well, I found new employment that takes me to interesting places. Her expression sobered. The collector I work for has been tracking temporal anomalies across 12 galaxies. All pointing to this moment, this place. She gestured to the Omnitrix. And that device. The night air grew colder as clouds obscured the stars, a gentle rain beginning to fall. Ben felt each droplet with heightened awareness, his senses somehow sharper than before. The Omnitrix hummed against his skin, responding to his elevated heartbeat. We need to move, Frightwig insisted, glancing skyward. That temporal implosion was visible across multiple dimensions. Every power-hungry entity with the means to detect it will be converging on this location. As if summoned by her words, a series of sonic booms echoed overhead as 3 ships dropped out of hyperspace. Their designs unfamiliar but their weapons systems clearly charging. Friend of yours? Ben asked dryly. Hardly, Frightwig scoffed. Probably Chronosapian loyalists or opportunistic scavengers. Her hair tendrils extended. Ready for combat. I can handle this if you can get that thing somewhere safe for analysis. Ben exchanged a glance with Eunice, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Years of working together had created an unspoken language between them. We're not leaving you to face this alone, Ben stated, turning his attention to the Omnitrix. The device seemed to anticipate his needs, cycling through alien forms before he even consciously selected one. Let's see what this evolution can really do. The transformation felt different, smoother, faster, more complete. Where before he'd always maintained some awareness of his human self beneath the alien form, now the integration was seamless. Diamond Head stood where Ben had been, but with subtle differences, more refined crystalline structures. A deeper connection to the molecular composition of his form. Interesting, Eunice observed, her eyes scanning him with scientific curiosity. Your transformation pairs more complete than previous iterations. The genetic lock that maintained portions of your human DNA seems to have been reconfigured. Fascinating, Frightwig deadpanned. Maybe save the scientific analysis for when we're not about to be attacked by interstellar bounty hunters. The first ship opened fire, energy weapons carving furrows into the ground around them. Diamond Head moved with instinctive precision, generating crystalline shields that not only blocked the attacks but reflected the energy back to its source. The feedback caused the ship's weapons to overload, forcing it to veer off. Get to the interceptor, Frightwig ordered, her hair tendrils whipping outward to intercept a group of armored figures dropping from the second ship. Each tendril moved with lethal accuracy. striking pressure points and weapon joints with expertise that spoke of years of combat training far beyond her former circus performances. Eunice touched Ben's crystalline arm. "We should go. ICA-N analyze the Omnitrix more effectively with proper equipment." Diamondhead nodded, but as they turned toward the interceptor, the third ship positioned itself directly overhead, a tractor beam illuminating the ground beneath them. "Move," Ben shouted, pushing Eunice clear as the beam intensified. To his surprise, he found himself unable to break free, the tractor technology somehow specifically calibrated to the unique properties of Petrosapian physiology. Frightwig finished dispatching her opponents and spun toward them, her eyes widening at the sight of Diamondhead being drawn upward. "Hair using targeted gravitational fields," she shouted. "Switch forms." Ben attempted to access the Omnitrix's controls, but the beam interfered with the transformation mechanism. "I can't change back." Eunice sprinted toward one of the fallen attackers, quickly stripping a device from their armor. With practiced movements, she reconfigured its circuits and aimed it at the ship above. A pulse of disruptive energy shot upward, temporarily destabilizing the tractor beam. Diamondhead fell, controlling his descent by creating crystal formations that slowed his momentum. The moment he touched ground, the Omnitrix began to pulse rapidly, the symbol on his chest flashing with increasingly bright light. "What's happening?" Frightwig called out, retreating toward them as more figures descended from the remaining ships. "The Omnitrix is responding to the attack," Eunice explained, her expression mixing concern with scientific fascination. "It appears to be adapting." The light from the Omnitrix symbol expanded outward, enveloping Diamondhead's form. When it receded, he remained a Petrosapian, but with significant changes. His crystalline structure now incorporated flowing lines of RGY that resembled the cosmic patterns visible during the convergence event. His crystals refracted light in impossible ways, creating prism effects that bent the very perception of those looking at him. "This is new," Ben observed, feeling power coursing through him at levels he'd never experienced. He raised his hand instinctively, and the crystals responded not by forming the usual projectiles, but by opening what appeared to be a small localized wormhole. The spatial distortion pulled in the tractor beam energy, redirected it through dimensional space, and expelled it back at the ship with amplified force. The vessel's shields collapsed immediately, its engines failing as systems overloaded. It listed to one side before emergency protocols engaged, forcing an uncontrolled landing in the clearing beyond the facility. "Dimensional manipulation," Eunice whispered, awe evident in her voice. "The Infinity Omnitrix isn't just an upgrade, it's integrating abilities from across the multiverse." Frightwig approached cautiously, her hair tendrils coiled defensively. "That's not possible. Even celestial sapiens are limited by dimensional boundaries." "Apparently someone forgot to tell the Omnitrix that," Ben replied, examining his transformed hands with newfound appreciation. The power flowing through him felt natural, as though it had always been part of his genetic potential, merely waiting to be unlocked. The remaining attackers hesitated, clearly reassessing their approach after witnessing the dispatch of their ship. Their brief pause gave Ben enough time to center himself, connecting more deeply with this enhanced form. Information flowed through his consciousness, not just about Petrosapian biology but about the fundamental nature of crystalline structures across multiple dimensions. The quantum principles that governed their formation, the mathematical perfection of their lattices. "They're regrouping," Frightwig warned, her body tensing as the attackers formed a tactical formation. "Any chance you can do that wormhole trick again?" Ben nodded, though uncertainty flickered through him. "I think so, but I'm not exactly working with an instruction manual here." "You never needed one before," Eunice reminded him, her confidence in him evident. She had retrieved more equipment from the fallen attackers, working rapidly to integrate the alien technology into her own systems. "Trust your instincts, Ben. The Omnitrix responds to your intent as much as your conscious commands." The attackers charged simultaneously, their coordinated movements suggesting military training. Frightwig moved with surprising grace, her hair tendrils extending to create a defensive perimeter that forced their opponents to alter their approach. Each movement of her tendrils flowed like choreographed dance steps, hinting at years of perfecting her unique abilities beyond the crude attacks of her villain days. Diamondhead focused on the larger threat, a hulking chimera Eunice wielding what appeared to be a neutron mace capable of shattering even his crystalline form. As the massive alien brought the weapon down, Ben didn't attempt to block it directly. Instead, he opened a small dimensional pocket that caught the mace mid-swing, redirecting its momentum through subspace before returning it behind the attacker. The Chimera Sui Generis stumbled forward, off balance, providing Ben the opening to deliver a precisely calculated strike to a neural cluster at the base of its neck. The alien collapsed, immobilized but unharmed. "Since when do you know alien pressure points?" Frightwig called out, genuinely impressed as she subdued two attackers simultaneously with her hair. "I don't," Ben admitted, equally surprised. "The knowledge just came to me when I needed it." Eunice finished her work on the salvaged technology, activating a device that emitted a pulse of disruptive energy. The remaining attackers' weapons systems failed immediately, leaving them vulnerable to Frightwig's efficient takedown. As the final attacker fell, an uneasy silence settled over the battlefield. The rain intensified, washing away traces of the conflict as lightning illuminated the clouded sky. Ben allowed the transformation to fade, returning to human form with a flash of light that momentarily turned the raindrops around him into prismatic droplets. "We need to leave before reinforcements arrive," Frightwig insisted, already moving toward her interceptor. "My ship has stealth capabilities that should mask our departure." Eunice gathered the most relevant pieces of technology from their defeated opponents. "Agreed. This equipment may help us understand what's happening to the Omnitrix." Ben followed them, the weight of the transformed device on his WR. East somehow both lighter and more significant than before. "Where exactly are we going?" "Plumber headquarters." Frightwig laughed sharply. "After what just happened? Not a chance. The plumbers have been compromised at the highest levels." "That's a serious accusation," Eunice countered, her loyalty to the organization evident in her tone. "It's not an accusation, it's a fact," Frightwig retorted as they boarded her ship. The interior was surprisingly spacious, modified with advanced technology that definitely hadn't come from standard suppliers. "How do you think the Chronosapian Collective knew exactly when and where to find Tennyson?" "They've had operatives in place for years, gathering intelligence, manipulating events." Ben settled into one of the passenger seats as Frightwig initiated launch procedures. "If what you're saying is true, we can't trust anyone until we know more about what's happening." "Not entirely true," Frightwig corrected, her hands moving across the controls with practiced efficiency. The ship rose silently, its stealth systems engaging to render them invisible to conventional detection methods. "There's one person in the galaxy who might have answers about the Infinity Omnitrix." "Azimuth," Eunice and Ben said simultaneously. "Exactly," Frightwig confirmed, setting coordinates into the navigation system. "But reaching him won't be easy. His location is more heavily guarded than ever since the incursion conflict." The ship accelerated smoothly into the upper atmosphere, the stormy landscape of Bellwood shrinking beneath them. Ben watched his hometown disappear, a strange certainty settling in his mind that when he returned, everything would be different. The Omnitrix hummed against his skin, almost as if agreeing with his unspoken thought. "There's something you're not telling us," Ben observed, turning his attention to Frightwig. "Why were you tracking the Chronosapians? What's your stake in this?" The former villain's expression tightened, her hair tendrils coiling more closely around her shoulders, a defensive gesture Ben hadn't noticed before. "Let's just say I have personal reasons for wanting to stop them." "Not good enough," Ben countered firmly. "If we're going to work together, I need the truth." Frightwig's eyes narrowed briefly before something in her posture shifted, a decision made. "Fine. The collector I mentioned. Ned, he's an interdimensional archivist named Paradox." Eunice inhaled sharply. "Professor Paradox recruited you." "Not exactly recruited," Frightwig clarified as the ship broke through Earth's atmos. Fear into the star-speckled darkness of space. More like offered an alternative to rotting in a null-void prison. "Turns out my abilities are particularly useful for retrieving certain artifacts that exist partially outside normal space-time." "And the Chronosapians?" Ben pressed. Frightwig's expression darkened. "They experimented on me. After the circus freaks split up, I was captured by a group claiming to be from some secret government program. Spent 2 years as their lab rat while they studied how my hair connects to my nervous system." Her voice remained steady, but the tendrils of her hair betrayed her emotion. Twitching with suppressed anger, Paradox found me, helped me escape. In return, I agreed to track the chronosapian activity that his temporal calculations identified as dangerous. The revelation cast her presence in a new light. Ben studied her more carefully, noticing the subtle scars at her temples, the watchful alertness in her eyes that spoke of someone who'd endured captivity. "I'm sorry that happened to you," Ben said sincerely. Frightwig shrugged, though the gesture failed to convey the casualness she likely intended. Ancient history. Point is, the Chronosapiens have been working toward the infinity convergence for centuries. Whatever they've awakened in your Omnitrix was important enough for them to sacrifice one of their own to achieve it. The ship accelerated to superluminal velocities, stars stretching into lines of light around them. Eunice moved to the ship's analysis station, connecting the salvaged technology to the onboard systems. "I'm detecting unusual quantum signatures from the Omnitrix," she reported after several moments of rapid data processing. "The device appears to be drawing power from multiple dimensions simultaneously." "Is that dangerous?" Ben asked, glancing at the transformed device. The faceplate now displayed a slowly rotating galaxy of stars within its depths, occasionally flashing with symbols in an ancient Galvan script. "Theoretically, it should be impossible," Eunice replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The energy requirements alone would tear apart conventional matter. Nothing out the Omnitrix has ever been conventional," Ben reminded her with a hint of his old humor. A proximity alert suddenly blared through the ship's cabin, cutting their conversation short. Frightwig SW, or under her breath as she checked the sensors. "We've got company," she announced, her hands flying over the controls. "Looks like a plumber enforcement vessel. They shouldn't be able to detect us through the stealth field. Unless they knew exactly what to look for," Ben concluded, the implications of Frightwig's earlier warning about plumber compromisation becoming increasingly credible. He communication system activated automatically as the plumber vessel moved into optimal range. The viewscreen illuminated with the image of a stern-faced magister, his uniform adorned with the insignia of the Special Containment Division. "Unidentified vessel, this is Magister Kornick of Plumber High Command. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. We have detected a Class 1 real-Y disturbance originating from your location." Frightwig muted the transmission, turning to Ben with raised eyebrows. "Your call, Tennyson. Surrender to potentially compromised plumbers, or run and be branded fugitives." The question hung in the recycled air of the ship's cabin as the enforcement vessel moved into position to intercept them. Ben felt the weight of the decision, acutely aware that whatever choice he made would irrevocably alter the course of events to follow. "We run," he decided firmly. "Until we understand what's happening with the Omnitrix, we can't risk it falling into wrong hands, even if they wear plumber badges." Eunice nodded her agreement, though concern shadowed her features. "The enforcement vessel outguns us significantly. Conventional evasion may not be possible." A slow smile spread across Frightwig's face, her hair tendrils uncurling with what almost seemed like anticipation. "Who said anything about conventional?" She unmuted the transmission lawn enough to offer a mocking salute to the Magister before cutting the connection entirely. "Hold on to something. This might get interesting." Her fingers danced across the controls, activating systems that hadn't been visible in the ship's standard interface. Hidden panels opened throughout the cabin, revealing technology that definitely wasn't standard on any legitimate vessel. "Is that a dimensional phase inverter?" Eunice asked incredulously, recognizing a particularly exotic component. "Those are highly restricted. Even the plumbers don't have access to them." "Paradox has interesting friends," Frightwig replied cryptically as she completed the activation sequence. "And even more interesting enemies. You'll learn to come prepared." The plumber vessel fired a warning shot across their bow, the energy blast dissipating harmlessly against their shields. The next shot wouldn't be a warning. "Ready or not," Frightwig muttered, engaging the phase inverter. The universe seemed to fold around them, reality itself bending as the ship partially shifted between dimensions. The sensation was disorienting, like falling in multiple directions simultaneously while remaining perfectly still. Through the viewscreen, the plumber vessel appeared to freeze in place as they slipped sideways through a layer of existence adjacent to normal space-time. "We can't maintain this state for long," Frightwig explained. sweat beading on her forehead as she navigated through the dimensional interstice. The ship wasn't designed to exist between realities. The hull creaked ominously, stress fracture. Appearing along seams as physics itself protested their transgression. Warning indicators flashed across the control panels, systems straining under the impossible conditions. We need to revert to normal space before the ship tears itself apart, Eunice warned, monitoring the structural integrity readings with growing concern. Ben looked down at the Omnitrix, its faceplate swirling with cosm. I see patterns that match the dimensional distortions visible through the viewscreen. An idea formed, intuitive rather than logical. I think I can help, he said, placing his hand on the ship's primary control interface. The Omnitrix is drawing power from multiple dimensions. Maybe it can stabilize our passage. Frightwig shot him a skeptical glance. Or maybe it'll disintegrate us across the multiverse. But since we're running out of options, go ahead. Ben concentrated, focusing on the connection between himself and the evolved Omnitrix. The device responded immediately, energy flowing from it into the ship's systems. The dimensional distortions surrounding them stabilized, the stress on the hull decreasing as the Omnitrix somehow harmonized their passage through the interstice. Fascinating, Eunice whispered, watching as the Omnitrix interfaced with the ship's technology without any physical connection. It's creating a stable bubble of defined reality around us. Where exactly are we going? Ben asked, maintaining his focus on the Omnitrix's connection to the ship. Galvan Prime would be the obvious choice, Frightwig replied, navigating through the strange knot space surrounding them. But it'll be the first place they look for us. We need somewhere off the grid to analyze the Omnitrix and contact Azimuth securely. Eunice's expression brightened with sudden realization. I know a place. Set course for the Andromeda Galaxy, Sector 17B, coordinates 346592. Frightwig raised an eyebrow but entered the coordinates without question. Care to share what's at this particular middle-of-nowhere location? Quote, a research outpost Azimuth established after the Hybrid War, Eunice explained. It was designed to study transdimensional phenomena affecting the Andromeda Galaxy. Only a handful of people know about it. And you're one of them because... Frightwig prompted. Because I helped design some of the analytical systems, Eunice replied with quiet confidence. Before I was separated from the Omnitrix core. The ship shuddered as they began the transition back to normal space, the dimensional phase inverter powering down. Ben maintained his connect onto the ship's systems through the Omnitrix, easing their passage back into conventional reality. They emerged in a remote sector of space, no planets or major stellar bodies visible nearby, just the distant glow of the Andromeda Galaxy's spiral arms. The enforcement vessel was nowhere to be seen, left behind in a different region of space entirely. That was unpleasant, Frightwig commented, running diagnostics on the ship's systems. But effective. No sign of pursuit, and the stealth systems are still operational. Ben released his connection to the ship, suddenly aware of how drained he felt. The Omnitrix's faceplate dimmed slightly, as though it too needed recovery time after the dimensional transit. You okay? Eunice asked quietly, moving to sit beside him. Her hand hovered near his. Not quite touching but close enough that he could feel her warmth. Just tired, he assured her. Whatever the Omnitrix is doing now, it takes more out of me than the regular transformations did. Your brainwave patterns showed significant alteration during the connection, she observed with analytical precision that did little to mask her concern. Almost as though you were processing information beyond normal human capacity. The observation brought back the strange sensation he'd experienced during the battle, knowledge flowing into his consciousness that he shouldn't possess. Understanding of alien biology and physics that went beyond his education. It was like having access to more than just alien DNA, Ben tried to explain. More like accessing their collective knowledge, their evolutionary memory. Frightwig set the ship on autopilot and turned to face them, her expression serious. That's exactly what the Chronosapiens were after. According to the information paradox shared, the Infinity Omnitrix doesn't just contain genetic samples, it contains the fundamental nature of each species across all possible timelines. Past, present, future, and alternate realities. That's impossible, Eunice stated flatly. The data storage requirements alone would Would require drawing information from across dimensions rather than storing it locally, Frightwig finished for her. Which is exactly what appears to be happening. Ben looked down at the device on his wrist with newfound appreciation and concern. So instead of just transforming me into aliens, she's connecting me to them across the multiverse. It's just a theory, Frightwig cautioned. But it would explain the dimensional energy signatures Eunice detected, and why the Chronosapiens were willing to sacrifice so much to trigger the transformation. The implications were staggering. The original Omnitrix had been the most powerful device in the galaxy, a tool for understanding and peace. Hat could also be weaponized in the wrong hands. This evolution represented something far more significant, with potential consequences that extended beyond their universe. We need to reach that outpost, Ben decided, his resolve strengthening despite his fatigue. If anyone can help us understand what's happening, it's Azimuth. ETA 4 hours at maximum safe speed, Frightwig reported, returning to the pilot's seat. I suggest you rest while you can, Tennyson. Something tells me quiet moments will be in short supply once word spreads about your fancy new wristwatch. Ben nodded, leaning back in his seat as the events of the day caught up with him. The Omnitrix continued its gentle pulsing against his skin, occasionally displaying fragments of alien script that flickered like distant stars in its depths. Whatever it was becoming, whatever he was becoming alongside it, represented a new chapter in a journey that had defined his life since that fateful summer when he was 10 years old. As he drifted toward sleep, his last conscious thought was a mixture of determination and uncertainty. The universe had changed around him many times before, but never had the change felt so profound, so irreversible. The Infinity Omnitrix represented something beyond technology, beyond even Azimuth's original vision, a convergence of possibilities that would reshape his destiny in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The soft hum of the ship's engines and the distant stars visible through the viewscreen faded from his awareness as exhaustion claimed him, dreams of cosmic alignments and ancient prophecies following him into slumber. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Royal Recognition. Koros hung in the viewport like a massive ruby against the velvet backdrop of space, its crimson deserts and ochre mount. Ain ranges swirling with perpetual dust storms. Not the most hospitable planet in the galaxy, but what it lacked in environmental comfort, it made up for in cultural significance. Homeworld to the Ramans, a species renowned for their physical prowess and warrior traditions, Koros had remained fiercely independent despite repeated attempts by various interstellar powers to bring it under their influence. Ben studied the approaching planet with a mixture of anticipation and dread. 6 years since his last visit, and that particular diplomatic mission had ended with him accidentally engaged to.O.A. Tetraman princess through a series of cultural misunderstandings. He'd managed to wriggle out of that commitment, but Tetramans weren't known for their forgiving natures. Having second thoughts, Frightwig asked from the pilot's seat, her magenta hair tendrils curling with amusement as she guided their ship toward the designated approach vector. You look like someone facing execution rather than a diplomatic envoy. Last time I was here, I nearly became part of the royal family, Ben replied dryly. Tetraman marriage customs involve combat, property destruction, and lifelong servitude. Eunice emerged from the ship's small laboratory compartment where she'd spent the past several hours analyzing data from the transformed Omnitrix. The Tetraman approach to courtship does seem unnecessarily violent by human standards, she observed, settling into the seat beside Ben. Though anthropologically speaking, ritual combat as a demonstration of genetic fitness is not uncommon across species. Ben shot her a bemused glance. Not helping, Eunice. The corners of her mouth quirked upward. Apologies. If it's any consolation, my analysis suggests your enhanced Petrosapian form would likely withstand even the most aggressive Tetraman courtship rituals. Still not helping. Frightwig's laughter filled the cabin, a sound Ben was still getting accustomed to. The former villa had revealed unexpected depths during their journey to the Andromeda research station. Beneath her sardonic exterior lay a sharp intellect and surprising wisdom born of hardship. The Chronosapian experiments had left their mark on her, but they'd also forged something resilient. Approaching Koros' orbital security checkpoint, she announced, her tone shifting to professional efficiency. Everyone remember their cover stories. After 3 days at the research outpost, they'd managed to establish secure communication with Azimuth, who had provided both information and instructions. The Gal Van Genius had confirmed their worst fears. The Infinity Omnitrix represented a fundamental shift in trans-dimensional technology, one that various factions would pursue relentlessly. Until Azimuth Cool D complete his own analysis and create appropriate safeguards, they needed to keep moving while gathering specific components he required. Dr. Benjamin Kirby, xenobiological researcher, Ben recited, representing the Galactic Scientific Consortium on a cultural exchange program. Eunice Alba, technical specialist and research assistant, Eunice followed smoothly. And I'm Helena Wheels, Saku, RT consultant with anger management issues, Frightwig concluded with a smirk. That last part's not in the cover story, but it adds authenticity. The ship's communication system chimed as they entered Koro's orbital space. A gruff Tetraman voice demanded identification and purpose. Frightwig transmitted the credentials Azimuth had provided, her expression neutral as they awaited verification. Credentials accepted. The Tetraman security officer eventually responded. Proceed to landing coordinates. Be advised that the Tetraman Kingdom of Stone celebrates the Festival of Champions. L visitors must observe festival protocols. The transmission ended abruptly, typical of Tetraman communication, brief, direct, and devoid of pleasantries. Festival of Champions? Ben questioned, raising an eyebrow. That wasn't in the briefing. Actually, it was, Eunice corrected gently. The festival occurs once every 12 Koros cycles, commemorating the unification of the 4 major Tetraman kingdoms. It involves ceremonial combat, feast days, and various trials of strength. Ben groaned. Perfect. A planet full of 4 armed warriors who already enjoy fighting, and we arrived during their combat festival. Look on the bright side, Frightwig suggested as she guided their ship toward the designated coordinates. With everyone focused on the festival, security might be more relaxed around the artifacts we're here to examine. The ship descended through Koro's upper atmosphere, buffeted by strong winds carrying red dust that scratched against the hull like countless tiny fingers. As they broke through the cloud layer, the landscape below came into sharper focus, vast crimson deserts interrupted by jagged mountain ranges, massive stone structures rising from the harsh terrain like the bones of ancient behemoths. Their designated landing area appeared to be a massive stone platform extending from the side of a colossal mesa. Dozens of other ships from various worlds were already docked, representing a surprising diversity of species for a planet not known for its hospitality toward outsiders. The festival must be a bigger deal than I thought, Ben observed as Frightwig executed a perfect landing despite the challenging crosswinds. I've never seen this many non-Tetramans on Koros. The Festival of Champions is one of the few times when the Tetramans welcome outsiders, Eunice explained. Her voice taking on the slightly distant quality it always did when she accessed her extensive cultural database. Every 12 cycles, warriors from across the Galaxy are invited to participate in the trials, though few non-Tetramans have ever advanced beyond the preliminary rounds. Ben unbuckled his harness and stood, stretching muscles stiff from the long journey. The Omnitrix pulsed gently against his wrist, its faceplate swirling with cosmic patterns that seemed to shift and change with his mood. In the days since its transformation, he'd discover an increasingly intuitive connection to the device, as though it were adapting to his thoughts rather than merely responding to commands. Remember, he cautioned his companions, we're here for the artifacts Azimuth identified. Not to get involved in local customs. Frightwig's hair tendrils coiled with skepticism. Says the guy wearing the most powerful device in the universe on a planet full of combat-obsessed warriors during their fighting festival. What could possibly go wrong? Your confidence is overwhelming, Ben replied dryly. The ship's external sensors reported breathable atmos. Fear with higher than Earth normal oxygen content and significantly stronger gravity, conditions that explained the Tetraman's renowned physical capabilities. Ben felt the difference immediately as they disembarked. His body suddenly heavier, movements requiring more deliberate effort. A delegation awaited them at the edge of the landing platform, 3 Tetraman warriors in ceremonial armor flawn. King, a smaller figure that Ben initially mistook for a juvenile until he noticed the distinctive markings of a diplomatic caste. Unlike the warrior Tetramans with their crimson skin and imposing musculature, diplomatic caste members possessed orange-hued skin and slightly more refined features adapted for interspecies communication. Greetings, off-worlders, the diplomat addressed them in accented but fluent galactic standard. I am Torox, third voice of the Court of Stones. You arrive at an auspicious time. Ben stepped forward, offering the traditional Tetraman greeting, right fist pressed to left shoulder. We're honored by your welcome. I'm Drive, Benjamin Kirby, representing the Galactic Scientific Consortium. These are my colleagues, Technical Specialist Alba and Security Consultant Wheels. Torox acknowledged each of them with a slight incline of his head. Your credentials have been verified, Drive. Kirby, the artifacts you seek to study are housed within the Royal Archive. However, he paused, 4 eyes blinking in their distinctive sequential pattern. Access to the archive requires special dispensation during the festival period. Special dispensation meaning what, exactly? Frightwig asked, her tone carefully modulated to hide her impatience. Participation, Torox replied simply. The festival honors our warrior traditions. Those who seek knowledge from our sacred places must first demonstrate respect for our ways. Ben exchanged glances with his companions, a silent communication passing between them. They had anticipated challenges in accessing the artifacts. But ritual combat hadn't been on the list of expected obstacles. What form of participation is required? Ben inquired, already suspecting the answer. All 4 of Torox's eyes crinkled in what passed for a Tetraman smile. The Trials of Respect, a series of 3 challenges designed to test strength, strategy, and spirit. They begin at sunrise tomorrow. Until then, you will be housed in T. He visitors' quarter and may observe the ongoing festivities. With that pronouncement, the diplomat gestured for them to follow as he turned toward a massive stone archway carved with intricate depictions of Tetraman warriors in various combat stances. The warrior escorts fell into position around them, not quite prisoners but definitely under supervision. As they walked through the imposing tone corridors of what appeared to be an ancient fortress built into the mesa itself, the sounds of the festival reached them, rhythmic drumming, the clash of weapons against shields, and the distinct roar of Tetraman crowds appreciating displays of strength and skill. The Trials of Respect, Eunice murmured thoughtfully as they walked. I've read accounts but never witnessed them firsthand. They're specifically designed to test non-Tetramans in ways that don't rely solely on physical strength. That's surprisingly considerate, Ben noted, genuinely impressed by the cultural accommodation. Practical, not considerate, Frightwig corrected. Even Tetramans understand the concept of different kinds of strength. They're warriors, not mindless brutes. Torox led them through easingly grand corridors until they emerged onto a massive balcony overlooking what could only be described as a colossal arena. Thousands of Tetramans filled stone seats surrounding a central fighting ground where 2 massive warriors currently engaged in ritual combat. The precision of their movements belied their size, each attack and counter executed with disciplined grace despite the earth-shaking force behind them. The Champions Circle, Torox announced with unmistakable pride. The heart of our festival. Tonight, Princess Looma Redwind defends her title against challengers from the 4 kingdoms. Ben nearly stumbled at the name, memories flooding back of a formidable Tetraman princess who had once claimed him as her fiancé. Princess Looma is the champion. For 3 cycles running, Torox confirmed. All 4 eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Ben's reaction. You know of our princess. Only by reputation, Ben recovered smoothly. Her skill is renowned even beyond Koros. The diplomat seemed satisfied with this answer, continuing their tour through the fortress city. The visitors' quarter turned out to be a surprisingly comfortable complex of chambers adapta. For various physiologies, evidence of Koros' increasing, if reluctant, engagement with the wider galactic community. Once alone in their assigned suite, Frightwig activated a signal jammer disguised as a personal grooming device. So, she began without preamble, you've got history with the princess we're likely to encounter. Care to elaborate? Ben winced. It's complicated. Years ago, I helped her father in battle, not realizing that by Tetraman custom, defeating a father means you're engaged to his daughter. I eventually got out of it by finding her a more suitable match. By Suida, BLE, you mean someone she could actually defeat in combat, Eunice clarified, familiar with the story from her access to plumber records. Tetraman females traditionally choose mates who can challenge them, which explains why these Trials of Respect might be particularly interesting for our team, Frightwig observed dryly. Especially with your new upgrades. Ben paced the room, the strange. Our gravity making even this simple action more deliberate. We need to focus on the mission. Azimuth was clear about the artifacts, the ancient resonator and the dimensional key. According to his research, they're components of original Galvan technology that predates the Omnitrix by millennia. And they're stored in an archive we can only access by participating in combat trials during a festival. Where your ex-fiancé is the reigning champion, Frightwig summarized, her hair tendrils coiling with amusement. No potential complications there. She's not my ex-fiancé, Ben protested. The engagement was a cultural misunderstanding. Quote, tell that to a culture where combat prowess determines marital status, Frightwig replied. From what I understand about Tetramans, they don't really do. T's complicated, on relationship statuses. Before Ben could respond, a resounding gong echoed through the complex, followed by an announcement in multiple languages inviting visitors to the evening's ceremonial combats. Curiosity overrode caution. Understanding Tetraman combat traditions would help them prepare for tomorrow's trials. The arena blazed with light as they found their designated viewing section. Massive crystalline formations harvested from Koro's deeper caverns amplifying and refracting torchlight to illuminate the fighting ground. The crowd's energy was palpable, not the bloodthirsty frenzy Ben had half expected. But something more disciplined and appreciative, like an audience at a complex musical performance. Different from Earth's sporting events, Eunice observed, her eyes tracking the patterns of movement as two warriors demonstrated traditional combat forms. The audience responds to technical execution as much as outcome. It's because combat is their art form. Frightwig noted with unexpected insight. The difference between mindless violence and martial artistry is intention and control. These people understand that distinction. The demonstration matches concluded, giving way to a ceremonial procession. Drummers entered first, their complex rhythms reverberating through the stone seating. Banner bearers followed, displaying the insignia of the four kingdoms of Koros. Then came the champions of each kingdom, massive tetramans even by their species standards, their armor adorned with symbols of past victories. Finally, to thunderous applause, entered a figure that commanded immediate attention despite being somewhat smaller than the kingdom champions. Princess Looma Red Wind moved with assured grace, her forearms adorned with ceremonial bracers rather than heavy armor. Her traditional headdress had been replaced with a more practical combat crown that left her face visible, a face that, even with Tetraman features, displayed clear intelligence and determination. She doesn't look like someone who'd be thrilled to see you again, Frightwig murmured to Ben. That's the understatement of the galaxy, he replied under his breath. The ceremonial introduction concluded with Looma taking a position at the center of the arena. Her voice, amplified by the natural acoustics of the space, carried clearly to every corner. I stand as champion of unified Koros, she proclaimed in the formal cadence of Tetraman ritual speech. I honor the traditions of our ancestors and the strength of our people. Who challenges the champion's circle? One by one, the kingdom representatives stepped forward, issuing formal challenges that Looma acknowledged with precise ritual responses. The pattern seemed almost choreographed until the Fina L challenger, a massive tetraman whose armor bore the volcanic insignia of the Eastern Kingdom. I, Gorvan of the Burning Mountains, challenge not only your right to the champion's circle, he proclaimed, deviating from the ritual phrasing, but your vision for our future. Koros cannot prosper while embracing off-world ways that weaken our warrior spirit. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clea. RLY This political challenge embedded within the ritual combat was unexpected. Looma's posture shifted subtly, her four eyes narrowing as she assessed her opponent. The strength of Koros lies in adapting while honoring tradition. She responded, her voice leveled despite the obvious provocation. I accept your challenge, Gorvan of the Burning Mountains. May your combat prove stronger than your arguments. The crowd roared approval at her response, the political tension adding spice to the anticipated combat. Officials moved forward, outlining the boundaries and rules of engagement. Unlike the demonstration matches, this would be full-contact combat with minimal restrictions. This isn't just sport, Eunice whispered, her analytical mind piecing together the subtext. It's political theater. The princess appears to represent progressive factions within Tetraman society. Which explains the artifacts in their archives, Ben realized. If she's pushing for more intergalactic cooperation, preserving ancient technology from other worlds would align with her politics. The combat began without further ceremony, Gorvan charging with all four arms wielding traditional weapons, a war hammer, battle axe, spiked mace, and short sword. His attack pattern utilized overwhelming force, each strike powerful enough to shatter stone. Looma, rather than meeting force with force, employed a fighting style Ben had never seen from a Tetraman. She moved fluidly between attacks, redirecting momentum rather than blocking directly, using Gorvan's greater mass against him. Her own strikes targeted joints and balance points rather than attempting to overpower her larger opponent. She's incorporating techniques from other species, Frightwig observed with professional appreciation. That's Petrosapian joint targeting combined with Aerophibian momentum redirection. She's studied off-world combat forms. The political statement couldn't have been clearer. Looma wasn't just advocating for cultural exchange. She was embodying it, demonstrating how Tetraman's strength could be enhanced rather than diminished by incorporating outside knowledge. The match continued for nearly 20 minutes. Gorvan's initially aggressive offense gradually faltering as Looma systematically dismantled his attacks. When the final moment came, it wasn't a brutal knockout but a technically perfect disarm end sequence that left her opponent weaponless and in a position where surrender was the only logical choice. The champion's circle remains unbroken, the chief official announced after Gorvan Khan's dead defeat with as much dignity as he could muster. Princess Looma Red Wind holds the title for a fourth cycle. The crowd's response was overwhelmingly positive, suggesting that despite Gorvan's challenge, the progressive faction represented by the princess held significant support. Looma acknowledged the audience with formal gestures before turning toward the royal viewing box where an imposing Tetraman who could only be King Red Wind observed with what appeared to be pride. Time to go, Ben suggested as the ceremony concluded. We should prepare for tomorrow's trials. As they rose to leave, Ben felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Glancing toward the fighting ground, he found Princess Looma staring directly at their section. All four of her eyes narrowed in what might have been recognition despite the distance. She said something to an attendant, who immediately departed with purposeful strides. I think we've been noticed, he muttered to his companions. Your talent for understatement remains impressive, Frightwig replied as they made their way toward the exit. Move naturally but quickly. They had almost shed the corridor leading back to the visitors' quarter when four Tetraman royal guards stepped into their path, led by the attendant they'd seen speaking with Looma. Dr. Benjamin Kirby, the attendant addressed him formally. Princess Looma Red Wind requests your presence for the traditional post-combat reflection. Not a request they could refuse without creating a diplomatic incident. Ben nodded his acceptance, exchanging quick glances with Eunice and Frightwig. My colleagues, he began, are welcome to return to their quarters, the attendant finished firmly. The princess requested you specifically. Frightwig's hair tendrils coiled protectively. We prefer to stay together. The attendant's four eyes blinked in the Tetraman equivalent of raised eyebrows. That would violate protocol during the Festival of Champions. Dr. Kirby will be returned safely to the visitors' quarter after the reflection. It's okay, Ben assured them, recognizing the political delicacy of their situation. I'll meet you back at our quarters. Reluctantly, Eunice and Frightwig continued toward their assigned rooms while Ben followed the royal escort through a series of passages clearly designed for Tetraman proportions. The corridors grew increasingly ornate, red stone giving way to polished surfaces inlaid with precious minerals that caught and reflected the light of crystalline sconces. They arrived at an expansive chamber overlooking the crimson deserts beyond the Mesa Fortress. Cooling evening winds swirled through open archways, providing relief from Koro's punishing heat. At the center, a traditional reflection pool filled with luminescent liquid cast rippling patterns across the carved ceiling. Princess Looma stood with her back to the entrance, still in her combat attire, gazing out at the three moons beginning their ascent over the horizon. Without turning, she dismissed the attendants with a gesture. Only when the massive doors closed did she finally face Ben. Benjamin Tennyson, she said, using his real name rather than his cover identity. You returned to Koro's wearing another's face and name. I expected better from Earth's greatest hero. Ben maintained Ed his composure despite the immediate collapse of their cover story. Princess Looma, your combat skills have improved considerably since we last met. As have your deception skills, she countered, moving toward him with the same fluid grace she'd demonstrated in combat. Up close, he could see the changes 6 years had wrought, not just physically, but in the confidence and authority she exuded. This was no longer the somewhat impetuous princess he'd encountered in his youth, but a leader with clear vision and purpose. How did you recognize me? He asked, genuinely curious. Their genetic disguises should have been foolproof. Looma made a sound that might have been a laugh. You may have changed your appearance, but not your stance, your movement patterns, or the way you observe a combat arena. A warrior recognizes another warrior beyond mere physical features. She circled him slowly, all 4 eyes evaluating with uncomfortable intensity. What I cannot determine is why Ben 10. Wyson would come to Koros under false pretenses during our sacred festival. Particularly when our last interaction ended with you manipulating me into combat with another suitor. The accusation hung between them, justified but incomplete. That's not entirely accurate, Ben countered. You were the one who declared me your fiancé without consultation, based on a cultural tradition I wasn't aware of. True, Looma conceded with surprising equanimity. My younger self was impulsive. Tradition without understanding is merely empty ritual. She stopped her circling, facing him directly. Which brings us back to the present. Why are you here, Ben Tennyson, seeking access to our most sacred artifacts? The directness of the question left little room for evasion. Ben weighed his options, recognizing that partial truth might serve better than complete fiction. I'm researching ancient technology with connections to the Omnitrix, he answered, holding up his wrist where the transformed device pulsed with cosmic light. Your archives contain artifacts that might help understand recent developments. Looma's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the Infinity Omnitrix, its apura. NCE clearly different from what she remembered. The rumors are true then. Your device has evolved. She stepped closer, studying the swirling patterns visible in its depths. There are ancient tetram, and legends about devices that contain the essence of worlds beyond worlds. We call them soul forges. Soul forges, Ben repeated, the term unfamiliar despite his extensive experience with the Omnitrix. Looma moved to a recessed alcove where a small control panel responded to her touch. A holographic display activated, showing ancient Tetraman pictographs depicting warriors wielding weapons that seemed to contain stars. Before Tetramans developed modern technology, our ancestors spoke of visitors from beyond the 3 moons who carried weapons containing the essence of cosmic beings, she explained. These soul forges allowed them to channel powers beyond mortal understanding. Most believe these were merely legends explaining early encounters with advanced species, but... She gestured toward the Omnitrix. Perhaps there was more truth to those legends than our historians acknowledged. The parallels were too specific to be coincidental. The artifacts I'm seeking might help understand that connection, Ben admitted. Looma deactivated the display, turning back to him with a calculating expression. The ancient resonator and the dimensional key. Yes, they have been of particular interest to our archaeological council recently. They appear to be responding to some external stimulus, becoming active after millennia of dormancy. The timeline matched the infinity convergence. Whatever had transformed the Omnitrix was affecting similar technology throughout the galaxy. I need to examine them, Ben stated simply. And you shall have the opportunity, Looma replied, if you survive the trials of respect. Which brings me to my actual purpose in summoning you. Her posture shifted subtly, becoming more formal. As champion, I have the right to select one of the trial participants for personal challenge. I am officially selecting Drive. Benjamin Kirby. The declaration carried unmistakable weight, not just a competitive challenge but something with deeper significance in Tetraman culture. Is this about our past? Ben asked directly, because if you're still holding a grudge. This isn't about grudges, Looma interrupted, a flash of irritation crossing her features. This is about responsibility. Your actions on Koros years ago had consequences beyond your departure, Tennyson. The suitor you selected for me, Gar, proved himself a champion in combat but a disaster in governance. His conservative ideologies and resistance to necessary change have strengthened regressive factions like Gorvins. Understanding dawned. So this is political. You're using the challenge to make a statement. Everything on Koros is political, she replied with unexpected candor. Particularly during the festival. By defeating an offworlder who previously bested me, I demonstrate both personal growth and the benefits of cultural exchange. The strategic thinking impressed Ben despite the uncomfortable position it placed him in. And if I refuse? You won't, Looma stated with certainty. You need access to those artifacts. I need a symbolic victory. Our interests align, even if our methods differ. Her expression softened slightly. I don't harbor resentment for past misunderstandings, Tennyson. We were both younger and less wise. But I do require your cooperation now. The proposal made tactical sense, even if it potentially complicated their mission. What exactly would this challenge entail? The third trial of respect, Looma explained. A combat demonstration emphasizing technique rather than brute force. As an officially designated challenger, you would face me rather than a standard trial judge. Ben considered the implications. And you're certain you can defeat me? He asked, allowing a hint of his old confidence to show through. I am not the same person I was 6 years ago either. For the first time, Looma smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her features. I'm counting on that, Tennyson. A worthy opponent makes for a meaningful victory. She extended one of her lower hands in a formal gesture. Do we have an agreement? You participate fully in the trials. I designate you as my personal challenger for the third trial, and regardless of outcome, you gain access to the artifacts you seek. The offer seemed too straightforward, making Ben suspicious. Why guarantee access regardless of outcome? What do you gain if I somehow win? Looma's smile widened. Political capital of a different sort. If an offworlder demonstrates superior technique against the champion, it validates my arguments about the benefits of cultural exchange. I win either way. Clever, Ben acknowledged, impressed by her political acumen. I've had to be, she replied simply. Maintaining progressive policies on a traditionally conservative world requires strategic thinking beyond the battlefield. Ben extended his hand, matching her formal gesture. We have an agreement. Their hands clasped briefly, the pact sealed in the Tetraman tradition. As their skin made contact, the Omnitrix pulsed brightly, responding to something in the interaction. Looma's eyes widened in surprise as faint patterns of cosmic energy briefly traced along her arm before fading. Fascinating, she murmured, examining her arm where the energy had touched. The legend spoke of soul forges recognizing kindred spirits. Before Ben could question her further, a resonant gong echoed through the chamber, signaling some significant moment in the festival timeline. The midnight reflection begins, Looma explained, moving toward the exit. My presence is required. Your escort will return you to the visitor's quarter. She paused at the doorway. Prepare well for tomorrow's trials, Tennyson. I expect nothing less than your best effort. With those parting words, she departed, leaving Ben with more questions than answers. The royal attendants reappeared moments later, escorting him through a different series of corridors that eventually connected to the visitor's quarter. Eunice and Frightwig awaited his return with barely concealed concern, the former pacing the common area while the latter sat with deceptive casualness, her hair tendrils coiled tightly in tension. Finally, Frightwig remarked as he entered. We were about to stage a rescue mission, diplomatic incident be damned. What happened? Eunice asked, her analytica. Gaze scanning him for any signs of distress or injury. Ben collapsed into a chair, the stronger Koros gravity making even this simple action more draining than usual. Our cover's blown. Princess. Looma recognized me despite the genetic disguise. Tetramans have highly developed pattern recognition abilities, Eunice noted. They evolved to identify threats in sandstorm conditions with limited visibility. That would have been useful information earlier, Ben replied dryly. Anyway, she knows who we are and why we're here. Frightwig leaned forward, her hair tendrils uncurling with tension. And, are we being expelled, arrested, challenged to mortal combat? Actually, she's helping us, Ben explained, recounting the conversation and arrangement he'd made with Looma. Shield War, anti-R access to the artifacts in exchange for participating in her political theater. That's surprisingly reasonable, Frightwig admitted, suspicion evident in her tone. What's the catch? The catch is I have to participate in ritual combat against the reigning Tetraman champion while the entire planet watches, Ben pointed out. And either way, it becomes a political statement about cultural exchange. Eunice processed the information with her usual methodical approach. It's actually quite elegant from her perspective. She's leveraging our presence to advance her own agenda while still maintaining Tetraman traditions. The princess seems to have developed considerably since your last encounter, Frightwig observed with a hint of amusement. Perhaps being jilted by Earth's greatest hero was character building. Quote, Ben winced at the characterization. I didn't jilt her. I found her a more suitable match according to her own cultural standards. How's that working out for her? Frightwig asked pointedly. Not well, apparently, Ben admitted. The match was politically disastrous. She's been fighting against conservative factions ever since. Eunice settled beside him, her expression thoughtful. Did she mention anything about the artifacts themselves? Azimuth's information was somewhat limited. She called them soul forges, Ben replied, explaining the Tetraman legends Looma had shared. And she confirmed they've recently become active after millennia of dormancy, likely connected to whatever caused the infinity convergence. The timing aligns with Uth's theory about resonant technology across the galaxy, Eunice agreed. If these artifacts are indeed proto-Omnitrix technology as he suspects, they may provide crucial insights into controlling your device's evolution. The Omnitrix pulsed gently against Ben's wrist, as though responding to the discussion. Since its transformation, the device had demonstrated an almost sentient awareness of conversations concerning it. Not exactly consciousness, but something beyond mere programming. We should prepare for tomorrow, Ben decided, rising despite the fatigue weighing on his muscles. The trials begin at sunrise. And Tetraman days are shorter than Earth standard. What about your arrangement with the princess? Frightwig asked. Are we just going along with her political agenda? Ben considered the question carefully. For now, yes. Her interests align with ours, and she's offering the most direct path to what we need. But stay alert. Politics on Koros clearly involve layers we're not fully seeing yet. The night passed quickly, each of them preparing in their own way. Eunice reviewed all available data on Tetraman combat traditions and trial structures, providing a comprehensive briefing over a breakfast of surprisingly palatable Koros native fruits and protein preparations. Frightwig insisted on running Ben through basic combat drills adapted for the higher gravity. Her hair tendrils occasionally demonstrating techniques that might prove useful against multi-limbed opponents. Dawn on Koros arrived with dramatic suddenness, the planet's rotation and proximity to its sun creating brief but spectacular sunrises that painted the crimson landscape in shades of gold and amber. The visitors' quarter bustled with activity as participants from a dozen worlds prepared for the day's events. Their escort arrived precisely at the designated time, a young Tetraman warrior who introduced herself as Tivox, apparently a relative of their diplomatic guide from the previous day. The first trial awaits, she announced without preamble. Follow me to the Chamber of Stones. The chamber proved to be a massive cavern beneath the Mesa Fortress, illuminated by the same crystalline formations they'd seen in the arena. Unlike the combat ground above, this space featured various stations with what appeared to be puzzles or challenges rather than fighting rings. The trial of foundations, Tivox explained as she led them to a registration area. Tetraman strength begins with understanding the stone beneath our feet. This trial tests not physical might but perception and problem solving. Dozens of participants from various worlds were already gathering, some looking confident, others clearly intimidated by the Tetraman environment. Ben noticed representatives from at least 15 different species, including several he recognized as regular participants in intergalactic sporting events. Professional trial runners, Frightwig murmured, following his gaze. People who make their living competing in cultural challenges across the galaxy. This complicates things. How so? Ben asked. They're not here for artifacts or political statements, she explained. They're here to win, with all the specialized training and potential performance enhancements that implies. A resonant gong signaled the official start of proceedings. Tetraman officials moved among the participants, assigning each to specific challenge stations. Ben found himself directed to a section containing what appeared to be massive stone blocks with complex patterns carved into their surfaces. The puzzle of architectural harmony, his station judge explained in heavily accented galactic standard. Arrange blocks to create stable structure that matches shadow pattern. He pointed to a light source projecting a complex silhouette onto a large vertical surface. The challenge was clear: arrange the massive stone blocks to create a structure whose shadow matched the projected pattern. The complexity lay in the three-dimensional nature of the problem. The shadow represented only one perspective of what needed to be a structurally sound arrangement. Ben examined the blocks, quickly realizing they were far too heavy for an unaugmented human to move. That, of course, was part of the test, finding a solution that didn't rely on Tetraman's strength. The Omnitrix pulsed against his wrist, almost suggesting a transformation. Ben hesitated, aware that using alien forms might draw unwanted attention despite their cover story. But the trials were designed to test Partichi Pants' natural abilities. Refusing to use his would be like a pyronite refusing to generate heat. He activated the device, cycling through available forms before selecting one particularly suited to the challenge. The transformation washed over him, his body reconfiguring into the crystalline structure of a Petrosapian. Unlike previous transformations, however, this version of Diamond Head retained the cosmic patterns flowing through his crystal structure that had manifested after the infinity convergence. The station judge nodded approval, apparently accepting the transformation as within competition parameters. Many approaches possible. Judge on result and method. Ben analyzed the challenge more thoroughly now, his Petrosapian perception allowing him to see structural patterns and stress points invisible to human eyes. Rather than attempting to move the massive blocks directly, he began creating crystalline supports and leveraging mechanisms that allowed him to shift the stone's minimal force applied at precisely the right points. As he worked, he became aware of Eunice at a nearby station, facing a different challenge involving sonic resonance patterns. Her approach was characteristically methodical, analyzing the problem from multiple angles before attempting a solution. Frightwig, at a station further away, appeared to be using her prehensile hair to manipulate multiple components of a complex mechanical puzzle simultaneously. The Tetraman observers moved among the stations, evaluating not just progress but methodology. Ben realized the trial truly was about foundations, demonstrating an understanding of fundamental principles rather than brute-forcing solutions. 2 hours into the challenge, Ben placed the final stone, adjusting its position with a precisely grown crystal lever. The shadow cast by his construction matched the target pattern perfectly, while the structure itself formed a stable architectural element that could theoretically support significant weight. The station judge examined his work from multiple angles, testing structural integrity with increasingly forceful impacts against key support points. When the structure remained stable, he nodded with approval. Balance achieved between form and function, he declared. First trial completed successfully. Similar pronouncements echoed across the chamber as other participants completed their challenges with varying degrees of success. Both Eunice and Frightwig received passing evaluations, though Ben noticed several competitors being escorted from the chamber after failing their assigned tasks. 57 participants began the first trial. Chivox informed them as she escorted the successful challengers toward the surface. 39 proceed to the second trial, a respectable ratio for off-worlders. The second trial took place in the open desert beyond the Mesa Fortress, a harsh environment of shifting sands and punishing heat. Massive tents had been erected to provide minimal shelter, with Tetraman officials distributing protective gear adapted for various physiologies. The trial of adaptation, Chivox announced. Koro's shapes our people through its challenges. This trial tests resourcefulness and endurance. The challenge proved to be a grueling navigation exercise across 15 kilometers of desert terrain, complicated by shifting dunes, unpredictable dust devils, and the need to locate specific markers while avoiding natural hazards. Participants were provided with minimal equipment, a compass calibrated to Koro's magnetic field, a water container, and a signal flare for emergency extraction. Tetramans evolved in this environment, Eunice observed as they prepared at the starting area. Their bodies naturally regulate temperature and de-filter air through specialized membranes. For non-Tetramans, this is significantly more challenging. Ben considered his transformation options, looking for a form that would handle the desert conditions efficiently without drawing undue attention. The evolved Omnitrix cycled through possibilities before settling on Sandbox, his sandbox Aeolian form with enhanced capabilities for desert navigation. The transformation felt different this time, the integration between his consciousness and the alien form even more seamless than before. Knowledge flowed through him, not just instinctive understanding of sand manipulation, but comprehensive awareness of desert ecosystems, pressure systems that created dust storms, and the microscopic composition of different sand types. "That's new," Frightwig commented, observing his transformed state. "I don't remember this one from your public appearances." "Sandbox," Ben explained, his voice carrying the slight whistling quality characteristic of the species. "Perfect for desert conditions, though this version seems to have some upgrades." The signal to begin the second trial echoed across the starting area. Participants scattered in various directions, some clearly having prepared strategies for the navigation challenge. Ben focused on the first marker coordinates, extending his awareness into the sand beneath him. To his surprise, he old sense vibrations and density changes that created a three-dimensional map of the terrain in his mind. "I can guide us through the quickest routes," he told his companions. "The sand itself provides a map if you know how to read it." "Lead on, Desert Master," Frightwig quipped, though her expression showed genuine appreciation for the tactical advantage. The journey through the desert revealed Ed Koro's harsh beauty, towering dune formations sculpted by relentless winds, crystal deposits that caught sunlight and scattered it in prismatic displays, and occasional glimpses of the native ecosystem's remarkable adaptations to extreme conditions. They located the first three markers with relative ease, Ben's enhanced senses detecting the buried signal beacons long before they were visible. The fourth marker, however, presented an unexpected challenge. Positioned at the edge of an active dust storm that obscured visibility and interfered with conventional navigation methods. "We'll need to wait it out," Frightwig suggested as they observed the wall of swirling red sand from a relatively safe distance. "Even with your sand manipulation abilities, that storm looks intense." Ben studied the storm patterns, his species' intuitive understanding revealing structures invisible to others. "There's a pattern to it, counter-rotating vortices creating a relatively stable eye at the center. If we time our approach correctly, we can move through the periphery and reach the marker without entering the highest intensity zones." Eunice analyzed his assessment with her characteristic thoroughness. "The risk calculation seems reasonable, provided we maintain physical contact to avoid separation." Holding hands in a sandstorm, Frightwig remarked with dry humor. "How romantic." They moved forward as a connected unit, Ben leading with Eunice and Frightwig following closely, each maintaining contact with the person ahead. As they approached the storm boundary, Ben extended his awareness into the swirling sands, subtly manipulating air currents to create a protective bubble around them. Not enough to completely block the storm, which would draw too much attention and defeat the adaptation purpose of the trial, but sufficient to maintain visibility and prevent the worst abrasive effects. Inside the storm's boundary, the world transformed into a swirling chaos of red and gold. This ability reduced to mere meters despite Ben's protective efforts. Sound became meaningless against the howling winds, forcing them to communicate through touch and pre-arranged signals. Ben navigated by feeling the storm's patterns, reading subtle pressure changes that indicated the path of least resistance toward their objective. 20 minutes of careful progress brought them to the marker, a ramen flag pole anchored to a stone outcropping at the storm's edge. As they registered their successful location of the fourth marker, Ben became aware of other participants struggling within the storm, some dangerously disoriented by the harsh conditions. Without discussion, their team altered their exit route to assist three competitors from different worlds who had become separated from their equipment. The trial tests adaptation, Eunice reminded them as they guided the grateful participants to safety. But Tetraman culture also values warriors' honor, which includes not abandoning others to preventable danger. The remainder of the course proved less hazardous but equally demanding, testing endurance as much as navigation skills. By the time they located the final marker and returned to the finish area, the Koro's sun had passed its zenith and begun its rapid descent toward the horizon. Of the 39 participants who began the second trial, 22 completed the course successfully, including their team. The professional trial runners Frightwig had identified earlier finished with impressive times, though none had matched their team's efficiency through the storm section. "You have completed the second trial with honor," Tivox informed them as they recovered in the cooling shade of the reception tent. "Few off-worlders navigate our storms with such skill." Third trial begins tomorrow at dawn in the Champions Circle. As participants dispersed to rest and prepare for the final challenge, a royal attendant approached their group. Dr. Benjamin Kirby, he addressed Ben formally. Princess Looma requests your presence at the pre-challenge feast this evening. Your companions are also invited as witnesses to the formal declaration. The invitation generated curious glances from nearby participants. Clearly, receiving personal attention from the champion was unusual. Frightwig raised an eyebrow questioningly, but Ben nodded acceptance before she could object. We would be honored to attend, he replied with appropriate formality. The attendant provided details regarding time and protocol before departing, leaving them to return to the Visito. Ars quarter for much-needed recovery time. So we're officially part of the princess's political theater now, Frightwig observed once they were alone in their quarters. Are we certain this alignment serves our mission? Looma's focus on cultural exchange benefits us, Eunice pointed out reasonably. Her progressive faction supports exactly the kind of archaeological access we require. Ben N. nodded agreement while examining the Omnitrix, which had reverted to its base configuration after he'd released the transformation. The cosmic patterns swirling within its depths seemed particularly active, perhaps responding to proximity to the artifacts they sought. There's something else, he added thoughtfully. When I shook hands with Looma to seal our agreement, the Omnitrix reacted. She CALLED at recognition of kindred spirits, according to their legends about soul forges. That's consistent with what Azimuth theorized about resonant technology, Eunice noted with interest. If the Etramond artifacts are indeed connected to the same fundamental principles as the Omnitrix, they might recognize each other on some quantum level. Or it could be reading your history with the princess. Frightwig suggested with a hint of amusement. Alien tech with a flair for drama. The evening feast proved to be an elaborate affair held in a massive hall within the royal section of the fortress. Hundreds of Tetramans from various castes and kingdoms mingled with off-world dignitaries and successful trial participants. Crystalline formations throughout the space provided both illumination and natural cooling, their structure drawing heat from the air in a remarkable demonstration of Tetraman environmental engineering. Their arrival generated noticeable interest, with conversations briefly pausing as they were escorted to a position surprisingly close to the royal dais. King Red Wind occupied the central seat, an imposing figure whose battle scars and regal bearing commanded immediate respect. Princess Looma sat at his right hand, her formal attire more elaborate than her combat gear but still practical by royal standards. Various dignitaries and kingdom representatives occupied positions of honor throughout the hall, their seating arrangements clearly indicating complex political hierarchies. Ben noted Gorvin, Looma's defeated challenger, seated with a group whose attire suggested the conservative faction she had mentioned. The feast began with traditional Tetraman ceremonial offerings to ancestors, portions of food and drink presented to empty seats representing fallen warriors. Once these rituals concluded, King Red Wind rose to address the gathering, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space. We honor the strength demonstrated in the trials, he proclaimed. Tetraman and Offworlder alike have shown worthiness through challenge. Tomorrow's final trial will determine those who earn the highest recognition. His formal address continued with acknowledgments of various political and military achievements, diplomatic announcements, and traditional festival proclamations. Throughout, Ben observed the subtle dynamics between factions. Certain announcements generated approval from some sections while others remained pointedly silent. As the formal portion concluded and the actual feast began, Princess Looma rose from her seat and moved purposefully toward their table. Conversations hushed as she approached, all eyes following the champion's movement with interest. Dr. Kirby, she greeted him formally, using his cover identity despite knowing his true name. Your performance in the trials has been noted with approval. As is my right as champion, I formally designate you as my personal challenger for tomorrow's final trial. The announcement sent an immediate ripple of reaction through the hall: surprise, speculation, and in some quarters, clear disapproval. Such designations were rare, particularly for off-worlders, and carried significant cultural implications beyond the competition itself. I accept the designation with honor, champion, Ben responded with the formal phrasing Eunice had prepared him with. May our challenge bring credit to the festival traditions. Looma acknowledged his acceptance with a ceremonial gesture before addressing Eunice and Frightwig. Your companion has been granted a rare privilege. I trust you will witness his effort with appropriate respect for our ways. We understand the significance, Princess, Eunice replied diplomatically. With formal obligations fulfilled, Looma might have returned to the royal dais. Instead, she surprised everyone by taking an empty seat at their table, an unprecedented gesture that immediately transformed the political subtext of the interaction. You've created quite a stir, Ben observed quietly as servants rushed to provide appropriate refreshments for the princess. Calculated disruption, Looma replied just as softly, her expression revealing nothing to distant observers. The conservative factions expected my designation but not this public association. It forces them to reconsider their assumptions about my approach to off-world relations. The political acumen continued to impress Ben. You've changed considerably since our last meeting. Necessity is an effective teacher, she responded, sampling a traditional Koro's delicacy with practiced grace. After Gar's political failures and the resulting factional conflicts, I was forced to develop skills beyond combat to preserve my vision for Koros. Throughout the meal, Ben observed how Looma balanced traditional Tetraman formality with subtle innovations in her interactions, demonstrating respect for cultural expectations while gently expanding their boundaries. Her political performance was as impressive as her combat skills had been, perhaps more so given the constraints she operated within. As the feast progressed, various dignitaries and trial participants approached their table. Drawn by the unprecedented access to the champion, Looma handled each interaction with diplomatic precision, introducing Ben and his companions with carefully Caleb. Rated respect that enhanced their status without overstepping cultural boundaries. Your friend Gorvin doesn't seem pleased with the attention we're receiving, Frightwig noted, nodding subtly toward the conservative faction's table where the defeated challenger watched with poorly concealed displeasure. Gorvin represents those who believe Koros should remain isolated from galactic affairs, Looma explained between conversations. My father defeated his father for kingship decades ago, adding personal grudge to political opposition. Yet you chose public designation rather than a private arrangement, Ben observed. Deliberately provocative, Looma's four eyes crinkled slightly in what passed for a Tetraman smile. Tradition without purpose becomes stagnation. Sometimes traditions must be challenged to preserve their essential meaning. The philosophical depth behind her statement revealed yet another dimension to the princess's character, not merely a political operator or skilled warrior, but a thoughtful leader with genuine vision for her people's future. As the feast concluded, Looma rose to return to her official duties. Rest well tonight, Tennyson, she said quietly, briefly dropping the formality of their public personas. Tomorrow's challenge will test us both in unexpected ways. With those cryptic words, she departed, leaving Ben with the distinct impressio. And that their arranged combat might involve complications beyond what they had agreed upon. She's playing a deeper game than she's revealed, Frightwig commented as they returned to their quarters. Quote, the question is whether we're pieces or fellow players. Either way, tomorrow brings us closer to the artifacts, Eunice reminded them pragmatically. We should prepare for the final trial with that objective in mind. Ben nodded agreement, though his thoughts remained on Looma's parting words and the subtle warning they contained. The Omnitrix pulsed gently against his wrist, cosmic patterns whirling in its depths like distant stars plotting unknown courses. Whatever political currents they had entered by accepting the princess's arrangement, they were now committed to seeing them through. The trials of respect had become more than a path to ancient technology, they had become a statement in a cultural conflict with implications beyond Koros. Dawn arrived with ceremonial fanfare, Ms. echoing across the Mesa fortress as participants and spectators gathered for the final trial. The Champions Circle had been transformed overnight, the central fighting ground now featuring a complex arrangement of obstacles, weapons racks, and what appeared to be mechanical elements with unknown purposes. The trial of integration, Tivox explained as she escorted them to the preparation area beneath the arena. Combat demonstration emphasizing technique, strategy, and adaptability. For those designated as personal challengers, the rules differ somewhat from standard participants. Different how? Ben asked, suddenly wary of potential complications. You face the champion directly rather than trial judges, she elaborated. The challenge parameters are set by tradition but interpreted by the champion according to their vision. Princess Looma has selected the ancient format known as Revelation Combat. The term meant nothing to Ben, but Eunice's expression showed immediate recognition. That's an unusual choice for an off-world challenger. What does it entail? Frightwig asked directly. Chivox's 4 eyes blinked in their sequential pattern. Revelation Combat reveals the true nature of the combatants through progressive challenges. It is traditionally used for, she hesitated, searching for the appropriate translation, compatibility assessment between potential mates. Ben nearly choked on the water he'd been drinking. Excuse me, the princess has modernized the interpretation, Chivox quickly clarified. In contemporary application, it tests Philo's ophical and tactical compatibility rather than traditional mating suitability. It remains, however, a deeply significant cultural framework. The political implications were immediately apparent. By selecting this particular combat format, Looma had transformed their arrangement into an even more powerful statement about cultural exchange, demonstrating compatibility between Tetraman and Offworld approaches at the most fundamental level. I should have known she wouldn't settle for a simple demonstration match, Ben muttered. Preparations continued with increased urgency, Eunice providing had limited information she had about Revelation Combat while Frightwig insisted on last-minute tactical adjustments based on the new parameters. All too soon, the signal came for participants to enter the arena. The champion's circle blazed with morning light, crystalline amplifiers focusing the sun's rays to create dramatic illumination effects. The 22 successful participants from previous trials entered to enthusiastic applause, taking positions around the periphery of the fighting ground. Ben found himself directed to a special area directly opposite the royal viewing box, clearly marked as the designated challenger's position. From this vantage point, he could see King Redwind observing with regal impassivity while various court officials and faction representatives filled the surrounding seats. The formal announcements began with traditional Tetraman ritual language, honoring ancestors and the warrior traditions of Koros. When Princess Looma entered, the crowd's response was thunderous, genuine admiration that transcended political factions. Whatever disagreements existed about her vision for Koros, her status as champion commanded universal respect. She moved to the center of the fighting ground with ceremonial precision, her combat attire similar to what she had worn during the championship matches but augmented with traditional elements that signified the Revelation format. 4 attendants carried ornate containers to positions around the periphery, placing them on ceremonial pedestals before withdrawing. Champions of Koros, Looma addressed the crowd, her voice carrying clearly through the natural acoustics of the arena. Today we conclude the trials of respect with honor to our traditions and eyes toward our future. I have designated an off-world challenger for Revelation Combat, demonstrating that respect can bridge worlds when approached with warrior's integrity. She gestured toward Ben, inviting him to join her in the center. As he moved forward, he felt the weight of thousands of eyes upon him, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. Whatever political statement Looma intended with this designation, it clearly represented a significant challenge to traditional thinking. They met at the arena's center, the traditional opening position requiring them to stand within arm's reach, facing each other directly. Up close, Ben could see the subtle tension in Looma's posture despite her confident expression. This moment carried significant risk for her political standing. Challenger, she addressed him formally, do you enter Revelation Combat with honor and honest purpose? I do, Ben responded, following the ritual phrasing Eunice had hastily taught him. Then let revelation begin, Looma declared, signaling the attendants stationed at the pedestals. Each attendant opened their container, revealing different elements that would define the combat phases. Earth, represented by stone spheres of various sizes, water, contained in crystalline vessels, air, symbolized by mechanical devices that appeared to control atmospheric conditions, and fire, manifested as energy projection technology rather than actual flame. The 4 elements reveal 4 truths, Looma explained for both Ben's benefit and that of the audience. We begin with Earth, the foundation of strength and stability. At her signal, stone spheres rose from their containers, floating through the air via some unseen force before arranging themselves in complex patterns around the fighting ground. The challenge became immediately apparent. The stones created an obstacle course that required both navigation skills and strategic thinking to traverse. The path reveals the approach, Looma stated, the ritual words carrying deeper meaning in this context. Show your foundation, challenger. The combat began without further ceremony, each of them starting from opposite sides of the stone arrangement. The spheres moved continuously, creating changing patterns that required constant adaptation. Some stones offered stable footing while others collapsed at the slightest pressure, some remained stationary while others followed. Complex orbital patterns through the arena. Ben quickly realized the purpose wasn't simply to reach the other side but to demonstrate how he approached obstacles, revealing character through movement choices. Rather than transforming immediately, he began in human form, analyzing patterns and testing responses before committing to a path. Looma moved through the stone obstacle course with impressive agility despite her size. Each choice revealing her approach, decisive but not reckless, respectful of tradition but willing to innovate when necessary. Her forearms provided obvious advantages for balancing and maneuvering, but she deliberately limited their use at certain points, demonstrating mastery beyond mere physical capability. When Ben encountered a particularly challenging section W, here the stones moved too quickly for human reflexes, he activated the Omnitrix, selecting gray matter, not for physical advantage but for enhanced analytical capacity. The transformation drew murmurs from the crowd, many having never witnessed the Omnitrix in action despite its galactic reputation. In gray matter form, the patterns became transparent mathematical equations, allowing him to predict movements and find the optimal path. Rather than bypassing challenges, he demonstrated problem-solving that respected the purpose behind them, revealing approach through adaptation rather than brute force or simple evasion. They reached the center simultaneously, completing the first phase in perfect balance. The crowd's response was appreciative if somewhat reserved. The element of Earth had yield foundations of compatible thought despite different methodologies. Earth has spoken, Looma declared formally. Water now reveals flow and adaptation. The crystalline vessels opened, releasing not conventional water but a mercury-like liquid that flowed across the fighting ground, forming constantly shifting patterns. Unlike the stone obstacles, these flowing forms required continuous movement. Stopping in one position for too long would result in submersion. Water seeks its level, Looma stated, beginning her movement through the flowing patterns. Response reveals nature. This Hayes tested reflexes and intuitive response rather than analytical thinking. Ben shifted from gray matter to a form more suited to fluid movement, fast track, with its enhanced speed and agility. The transformation again drew reaction from the crowd, particularly when the cosmic patterns that had manifested since the infinity convergence became visible, flowing through his form like living energy. Looma's eyes widened briefly at the sight, though she maintained her ceremonial composure. Her own movement through the liquid patterns demonstrated years of disciplined training, each response perfect. Calibrated to the changing conditions. Where Ben relied on speed and anticipation, she utilized precision and economy of motion, different approaches achieving similar results. The liquid formed increasingly complex patterns, eventually requiring direct interaction between the combatants as they navigated overlapping flows. Their movements became a coordinated dance, each anticipating and complementing the other's responses without direct communication. The crowd's energy shifted noticeably, appreciation deepening as the demonstration transcended mere combat skill. Water has spoken, Looma announced as the second phase concluded. Air now reveals thought and perspective. The mechanical devices activated, creating localized atmospheric effects throughout the arena, some areas with increased pressure, others with swirling vortices, some with near vacuum conditions. Unlike the previous elements that tested physical navigation, air challenged perception and decision-making under varying conditions. Breath sustains life, Looma stated, her ritual words carrying particular significance in this context. Choice reveals understanding. This phase required direct combat rather than parallel demonstration. They would face each other within the varying atmospheric conditions, each seeking advantage while adapting to constantly changing environments. Weapons racks activated, offering traditional Tetraman fighting implements alongside options suitable for various physiologies. Ben selected a staff designed for leverage rather than brute force, while Looma chose paired short swords typical of Tetraman duelists. The crowd leaned forward with anticipation. This would be the first direct confrontation between champion and challenger. Looma moved with the practiced precision of someone who had trained with weapons since childhood, her forearms allowing complex attack patterns that would overwhelm most opponents. Ben countered by transforming into forearms, a deliberate CHOICE that generated immediate reaction from the Tetraman audience. By adopting their own physiological form, he demonstrated respect for their traditions while creating a level playing field. Their combat flowed through the varying atmospheric zones, each adjustment revealing different aspects of fighting philosophy. In high-pressure areas, Looma emphasized grounded stances and powerful strikes. In swirling vortices, she demonstrated adaptation with fluid movements. In near-vacuum zones, she employed conservation of energy and precise targeting. Ben matched each approach with complementary techniques, not mimicking but harmonizing, creating a combat dialogue that spoke to philosophical compatibility despite different origins. The Tetraman form he adopted showed subtle differences from standard members of the species. The cosmic patterns of the infinity Omnitrix flowing through his musculature and enhancing his connection to the transformation. The crowd's response grew increasingly enthusiastic as the demonstration progressed, appreciation for the technical skill displayed overriding political considerations. Even representatives of the conservative faction showed grudging respect for the compatibility being demonstrated. Air has spoken, Looma declared as they concluded the third phase in balanced position. Fire now reveals truth and transformation. The final element activated, energy projectors creating controlled plasma manifestations that shifted between various forms, some resembling traditional Tetraman combat spirits, others taking shapes from diverse cultural mythologies across the galaxy. Unlike the previous elements, fire would test not just physical ability or combat skill but response to symbolic and psychological challenges. Flame illuminates darkness, Looma stated, her expression intensifying. Revelation completes understanding. The final phase began with energy forms creating illusory opponents drawn from each combatant's own experiences, for Looma. Representations of political adversaries and challenges to her leadership, for Ben, manifestations of enemies faced throughout his hero career. The purpose became clear, revealing how each approached their core purpose and values when confronted with fundamental challenges. Ben shifted through multiple transformations during this phase, each chosen not for power but for the symbolic presentation of different approaches to heroism, intelligence through gray matter, protection through Diamond Head, healing through Swampfire, each revealing aspects of his fundamental character through combat choices. Looma similarly demonstrated her core values through her responses to the energy manifestations, showing compassion even while defeating representations of political enemies, demonstrating restraint when victory was assured, revealing a leadership philosophy based on strength tempered by wisdom. As the final phase reached its climax, the energy manifestations combined into a glay challenging form that required them to work in coordinated partnership rather than parallel demonstration. Without hesitation, they fell into complementary roles, Looma providing direct strength Ben created strategic advantages through transformational flexibility. The crowd's response built to a crescendo as they overcame the final challenge together, demonstrating perfect compatibility of approach despite their different worlds and backgrounds. Even King Redwind leaned forward with evident interest as the revelation combat concluded with a balanced resolution neither could have achieved alone. Fire has spoken, Looma announced, her voice carrying both ritual formality and genuine emotion. Revelation is complete. The traditional conclusion required a formal acknowledgement of what had been revealed. Looma turned to face Ben directly, all four eyes meeting his with startling intensity. Revelation combat has demonstrated compatibility of foundation, flow, thought, and truth between champion and challenger. She declared, the final trial is complete with honor to both. The crowd's response was thunderous, appreciation for the demonstration transcending political divisions. Even representatives of the conservative faction appeared impressed despite their ideological opposition to off-world influence. King Redwind rose from his seat, offering the traditional acknowledgement gesture that signified his approval of the combat's outcome. The formal ceremonies continued with recognition of all successful trial participants, but the political impact of the reveillette ion combat clearly overshadowed other proceedings. By demonstrating such profound compatibility between Tetraman and off-world approaches, Looma had created a powerful statement in support of her progressive vision. As participants were escorted from the fighting ground, Ben found himself directed toward a different exit than the other competitors, one leading toward the royal sections of the fortress rather than the visitors' quarter. Eunice and Frightwig were guided to join him, their expressions reflecting uncertainty about this unexpected development. "The princess requests your presence for the formal recognition ceremony," their escort explained. "As her designated challenger with successful completion, you have earned special status." The implications weren't entirely clear, but they followed without protest. Recognizing that they had achieved their primary objective, access to the artifacts they sought, the royal recognition ceremony would provide the perfect opportunity to amine the ancient resonator and dimensional key while fulfilling their political obligations to Looma. The escort led them through increasingly ornate corridors until they reached what appeared to be ancient chambers deep within the Mesa fortress. Unlike the more public spaces designed to impress visitors, these rooms contained artifacts and historical records clearly preserved for their cultural significance rather than display value. Princess Looma awaited them in a central chamber housing what could only be described as a repository of ancient technology, devices and artifacts from various civilizations preserved in environmental containment fields. King Red Wind stood nearby, his imposing presence softened somewhat by evident curiosity about the off-worlders who had participated in his daughter's politically significant demonstration. "Benjamin Tennyson," Looma addressed him directly, dispensing with cover identities now that they were in private chambers. "You have fulfilled our arrangement with honor. As promised, you shall have access to the artifacts you seek." She gestured toward a section of the repository where two devices stood out from the others, one a crystalline structure with geometric perfections that seemed to bend light around it in impossible ways, the other a metallic construct whose surface shifted and changed as though existing partially in another dimension. The ancient resonator and the dimensional key, King Red Wind identified them, his deep voice reflecting both pride and caution. "Artifacts our ancestors discovered millennia ago, predating even our earliest recorded histories. Until recently, they remained dormant despite our best efforts to understand them." "When did they become active?" Ben asked, the Omnitrix on his wrist pulsing with increasing intensity as they approached the artifacts. "During the three-moon alignment 60 days past," Looma answered. "The same celestial event visible across multiple sectors that your scientists called the Infinity Convergence. The timing aligned perfectly with the transformation of the Omnitrix." As Ben moved closer to the artifacts, the device on his wrist responded with increasingly bright pulses of cosmic energy. The artifacts similarly reacted, the resonator emitting harmonic tones while the dimensional key's shifting surface patterns accelerated. "They recognize the Omnitrix," Eunice observed, her analytical mind already processing the implications. "Just as Azimuth theorized, our legends speak of soul forges responding to one another across great distances," Looma confirmed. "The ancient texts describe them as pieces of a greater whole, separated for reasons lost to time." Ben extended his hand toward the artifacts, the Omnitrix's reaction intensifying as the distance decreased. Before he could make contact, King Red Wind's voice halted him. "Before you proceed, Tennyson, I would know your true purpose," the king demanded, his tone carrying authority without hostility. "These artifacts have protected Koros in ways we are only beginning to understand. What do you intend with them?" The question deserved an honest answer. "The Omnitrix has evolved into something called the Infinity Omnitrix," Ben explained, showing the transformed device with its cosmic patterns and dimensional depths. "Azimuth believes these artifacts contain knowledge necessary to understand and control that evolution. Without them, the device could become unpredictable, dangerous even to the universe itself." King Red Wind considered this explanation, all four eyes evaluating Ben with the wisdom earned through decades of leadership. "And once you have this knowledge, we return the artifacts to Koros," Ben promised without hesitation. "They belong to your people and your history. We seek only to learn from them, not possess them." The king exchanged a glance with his daughter, some unspoken communication passing between them. Looma nodded slightly, apparently confirming something her father needed to know. The revelation combat showed truth beyond what most observed, King Redwind stated. My daughter selected that format not merely for political statement but to verify your character. What fire revealed supports your words. He gestured toward the artifacts. Proceed with our blessing. With that permission granted, Ben approached the ancient devices, Omnitrix guiding his movements almost instinctively. As his hand made contact with the resonator, energy flowed between them, not transferring but synchronizing, patterns aligning across dimensional boundaries. The dimensional key responded simultaneously, its shifting surface stabilizing into configurations that matched the cosmic patterns visible within the Omnitrix. Knowledge transferred through the connection. Not as conscious thought but as intuitive understanding, the fundamental principles behind the technology becoming clear without words or explanation. Eunice monitored the ion with specialized equipment provided by Azimuth, recording the energy patterns and information exchange for later analysis. Frightwig maintained vigilance, her hair tendrils extended slightly in protective readiness despite the apparent safety of the situation. As the synchronization completed, Ben gained clarity about the Infinity Omnitrix that had eluded him since its transformation. The Devi CE hadn't merely evolved, it had reconnected with its original purpose, a function that extended beyond transformation into fundamental cosmic maintenance. The Omnitrix was never just about DNA samples, he realized aloud. It was always meant to be part of something greater, a system for maintaining dimensional stability across the multiverse. The Soul Forges, Looma confirmed. Our legends describe them as anchors that prevent worlds from drifting too far apart. The implications were staggering. The Infinity Convergence hadn't created something new but restored something ancient, designed by predecessors to even the Galvan, perhaps the very beings from whom they had learned their science. As the energy exchange concluded, Ben carefully withdrew his hand from the artifacts. The Omnitrix continued to pulse but with a more regular pattern, as though having integrated the new information into its operational parameters. The artifacts similarly stabilized, their active state now harmonized with the Omnitrix rather than randomly energized. We have what we need, Ben confirmed to his companions. Azimuth can analyze the data to create the stabilization protocols. King R. Edwind observed the interaction with thoughtful consideration. Your Omnitrix and our artifacts now speak the same language, he noted perceptively. What does this mean for Koros? It means your world is part of something essential to universal stability, Eunice explained respectfully. These artifacts serve as anchor points in a cosmic network. By preserving them, your people have protected reality itself. Whether you knew it or not. The king absorbed this information with the gravity it deserved. Then our ancestors' wisdom exceeded even our understanding. We shall continue to protect these soul forges with renewed purpose. As they prepared to depart with the collected data, Looma approached Ben directly, her expression thoughtful. The revelation combat revealed more than political compatibility, Tennyson. You've changed since our last encounter, grown in ways that merit recognition. As have you, Ben acknowledged sincerely. Your leadership shows wisdom beyond combat skill. Perhaps when your current mission concludes, you might return to Koros, she suggested with surprising directness. Not as hero or diplomat, but as yourself. Much remains to be discussed between us. The invitation carried clear significance in Tetraman culture, not a formal courtship proposal but an acknowledgement of potential worth exploring. Ben recognized the honor it represented, particularly from someone of Looma's position. I'd like that, he replied honestly. Once the Infinity Omnitrix is stabilized and the immediate crisis addressed.